When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, John Boy. User, First Eyes 1A. Posted, March 2nd, 1996.
My freshman year of high school was the worst year of my life up to that point. First, I blew out my right knee on the football field. It was a no-contact injury, too, so it wasn't like I had a great story. I just twisted it wrong and went down like a marionette with its strings cut. I was never going to be a pro football player. I wasn't that big or that good, but when you're good at something in high school, you're pretty sure it's going to be that way forever. If you've ever torn cartilage, you know that blinding flash of pain, and if you don't, I envy you. It was the first indication I ever had that my body wasn't always going to do what I wanted it to do, and I vividly remember crying face down into the grass. To this day, the smell of a freshly cut lawn will sometimes still make me tear up a little bit. I was out of the season and in a leg brace for months. I told myself it couldn't possibly get any worse. That's when the phone call came about my grandfather. My grandpa's name was Norm, and he always wanted us to call him that. For whatever reason, he wasn't a grandpa guy. He was loving and treated us like gold when he saw us, but he just didn't like the name for whatever reason. Norm was big on routine, so when he called on a different day than usual, I knew something was up even before Mom hung up the phone. When she at last turned toward me and Dad, her face crumpled before she could even get a word out. She'd lost her mother, my grandmother, before I was born, but having to confront losing Norm brought it all back, I think. When she was able, she explained that the diagnosis was terminal, but the doctors had given Norm up to 5 years, so he insisted we not disrupt our lives by making a trip down there. It felt weird not to go, but my folks eventually agreed we'd wait until Christmas to visit Boca like we'd planned. I remember asking him about it on one of our monthly phone calls. "Norm, why don't you want to see us?" I asked. "You're dying, right? Shouldn't we come see you?" Hey, he said softly. "I never said I don't want to see you, John Boy. I always want to see you, but as far as dying goes, I always had a head start on you guys, so this isn't news. Besides, you really want to try flying with that knee of yours like it is? Nah, you gotta take care of your knees, kid. They're not always gonna work the way you want them to." That made me laugh. This one doesn't work the way I want it to now. He laughed too, and we moved on to a different subject. The last thing he said before we hung up was, "See you at Christmas. I love you, John Boy." We never spoke again. The doctor gave him 5 years before the cancer ate all the way through him, but that didn't account for the knock-on effects it was having on his other organs. Norm had a heart attack 2 weeks after that phone call, and I ended up flying with a busted knee anyways. I still couldn't flex it to any great degree, so I had a huge brace keeping it straight. It wasn't a great time. Being in Norm's house without him there was weird. His clothes were in all the closets. Everything smelled like his cologne, like he had just stepped out for an ice cream a second ago. I hated every minute of it. He used to collect old 1/32 die-cast cars and model plane kits and would even let me play with them when I was little, even though most of them were collectibles from the 30s. He used to say that when he was a kid, he'd had all his toys taken away from him, so he decided he'd never take a toy away from anybody else. He was proud of those cars and had a special display case made for them. It didn't seem right that the cars were still there, polished and shiny, but he'd never get to see them again. It was too much for me, and I split after maybe half an hour while Mom and Uncle Ernie were debating what to do with everything. Norm's place was in a gated community next to the ocean, and there was a private stretch of beach leading up to a little park with some benches. I crutched my way over and eased myself down to the bench. It was a beautiful day, and the waves looked like glass castles moving ashore, but nothing could distract me from the knowledge I would never see him again. I tried not to cry, but couldn't stop it. It was like a dam breaking, and I sobbed so hard it shook my whole body. My knee hurt like hell, but I didn't care. All I wanted to do was cry until I died. It was the smell of his cologne that stopped me. I thought Mom or Uncle Ernie had heard me and come out of the house, so I tried to wipe my face clean. That's when I felt his hands on my shoulders. Not Uncle Ernie, not Dad, but Norm. He'd always had big hands, and when I was a kid, he would stand behind me, one on each of my shoulders. It used to feel like a giant was watching over me and made me feel safe. I heard his voice in my ear. "It's okay, John boy, let it out. This will pass. Nothing is forever, except for the good stuff. That never goes away, I promise. We'll see each other again." Then it was all gone. The voice, the hands, the cologne, all like it had never been there. All that was left was the sound of the sea, endlessly moving toward the shore.
Subject: Knochdraienmas. User: GRT187. Posted May 9th, 1997.
Out here in the hill country, it gets quiet at night. It's part of the appeal. You get yourself a nice big spread, horses, the whole 9 yards, and if God is on your side, you stay 10 steps ahead of the bank until they plant you in the earth. I've been out here in the far reaches of Texas for almost 15 years now, living that dream and never regretted the move. Lately, though, I can't relax the way I used to. A tension hums in my chest where there used to be peace. Something is in the house with me. The person in my family I'm closest to is my cousin Adelaide, who lives down by Galveston. We don't get to see each other much in person anymore. We're both too old and set in our ways to travel much, but we like to talk on the phone once a week. I've got a long extension cord on the handset, and sometimes, even in the winter, it feels nice to wrap myself in a blanket and take the phone out on the porch. That way, we can chat while I get to watch the night. More hours than I can ever count have passed this way. Her voice, my only company in a house miles from anywhere else. Just under a week ago, we were having one of those late-night gab sessions while I sat out front, looking up at a clear winter sky. It was almost cold enough to send me back inside, which means it was likely too cold for any of the few animals I'd expect to see around to make an appearance. Still, the longer I sat there, the surer I was of being watched. When you live as far out as I do, cars can be heard for at least a mile, and hikers half that if the wind is right. All that is to say, if it were a person with eyes on me, I'd likely have heard them coming. And yet, the longer I sat there, the more I'd have put money on not being alone. Slowly, a peculiar thing began to happen. As the feeling of observation grew, so too did the darkness surrounding my house. It didn't cloud over, nothing like that. It's almost like a black mist began to gather, thickening the air until I couldn't see more than 10 feet beyond the edge of the porch. The stars were still visible, 10,000 pinpricks in the veil of night. None of them able to dispel the blackness all around me. It became oppressive, so much so I told Adelaide to wait for a moment while I settled myself back inside on the couch. Only once the curtains were drawn did I feel anything even close to comfortable. Of course, I told her none of it, lying and saying that I needed to warm up. Later, after our conversation was over, I fell asleep there, feet up and my head looking toward the front door. I had the strangest dream. In it, I was exactly in the same position on the couch I'd fallen asleep in, the lights off. As I lay there, I realized I could see something there maybe 20 feet from me. It was hard to make out, like it had to be glimpsed through shifting smoke. With concentration, I began to sharpen my focus, almost seeing as if in night vision. There, at my front door, was a series of tiny, vertical, off-white stones, off-white like dominoes, except much more crudely hewn. Bones. I realized they're bones. In front of them were 3 tiny men, no more than 3 apples high each, Smurf height. The diminutive figures took turns rolling something hard and round at the primitive, which fell down in various combinations. It's difficult to describe my feelings at that moment. It was like seeing a college football mascot take its head off after leaving the field, exposing the man inside. You know it's not what you're meant to be focusing on, but it's so strange that you can't tear your eyes away. It didn't take long before the tiny men felt my gaze on them, or maybe they'd felt it the entire time and had been patient with me after that point. Whatever the case, one of them whipped around to stare directly at me before saying in a voice so high-pitched it could have been huffing helium, "Go to bed." I snapped awake on the sofa. The men were gone and I shuffled off to my bedroom. In the morning, the unusual darkness and dream felt a million miles away. I didn't think of them again until it was time to drive back home from town. My old Buick doesn't always start on the first go-round or the second. Finally, the third time was the charm, the engine chugging to life. I glanced in the rear view to make sure it was clear to pull away from the curb and spotted a heavy black cloud of exhaust. Immediately, the memory sprang forward and a shudder ran through me. I ran the car heater all the way back, and no matter how high I cranked that dial, it couldn't even begin to warm me up. That night was not eventful, nor was the one after. The third night, however, last night, was an ordeal I'm afraid to repeat. Laying in bed, I hadn't even begun to feel sleep steal over me when the sound of rolling bones clattered in from the living room. High, tight voices spoke amongst themselves, low enough I could only make out one word: Knochdraienmas. In another life, I'd spent time living and working on an American military base in Germany, where I learned enough of the local language to understand what the mysterious little man had said. Knochdraienmas roughly translates to the bone-turning mass. Just thinking the words made me uncomfortable, producing a grinding sensation I could feel in my teeth. It spread out from my mouth, vibrating throughout my entire body. I found I couldn't move at all save to breathe. All around me, shadows collected until a solid wall separated me from the rest of my bedroom, from the rest of the world. Breathing became difficult, as if there was a weight on my chest. The word came again, closer than ever before, whispered in my ear like a promise from a lover. Knochdraienmas comes, and you will see. I had no choice but to stay that way, barely able to draw breath until morning sunlight streamed through my bedroom windows, burning away the darkness. Now, I'm faced with a choice: leave or stay and defend my home. I just don't know what I'm defending against or why it's chosen me.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.